Member Jose Weezer. I'm joined by Councilmember Zine. This is the Audits and Governmental Efficiency Committee. We have 4 items today, and what we will do is, on item number 2, continue that item for 30 days. That is a communication from the controller relative to an operational and compliance audit of Los Angeles Police Commission's oversight and management of the city's auto impound contracts. I understand there's a report that this committee is waiting for, and we haven't received that report, so that will be continued for 30 days. Item number 3, we will hear the item, but we intend to continue that item for 90 days. And if we could start with item 4 and then go on to number 1 and then 3, we'll circle around to 3.
Item number 4 is a communication from the controller relative to the fiscal year 2006-2007 Cost Allocation Plan 31 Audit Report for Central Services and Fringe Benefits ended June 30, 2007.
Thank you. Item number 4, someone from the controller's office here?
I'm Louis Benjamin from the Controller's Office.
And I'm Grace Yun from Simpson & Simpson, the auditor on the cost allocation plan.
The Cost Allocation Plan audit is a part of the City Council's annual financial statement audit contract. And CAP 31 was developed based on actual fiscal year 2006-07 expenditures. The CAP overhead rates were calculated in accordance with the federal regulations, and Simpson & Simpson has issued a clean opinion on the CAP 31 plan. Now, although it has been audited, CAP 31 still has to be reviewed by the city's single audit cognizant agency, the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development, which contracts it out to Health and Human Services because they have the expertise to do that type of a review, and we negotiate directly with HHS. After the feds accept the city's proposal, the Controller's Office will notify city departments of the approved rates, and in the meantime, city departments can use CAP 30 rates or CAP 31 based on whatever they've negotiated or agreed upon with their grantors. Now, these rates are also used by city departments to develop their own billing rates and interdepartmental billings, as well as for related cost reimbursements. We recommend that the report be noted and filed.
Okay. Anything to add from Simpson & Simpson?
No, actually we just reviewed we audited the rate and we think that it's reasonable.
Okay. Thank you. So we'll don't file this item unless Mr. Zine has any questions.
Fine with me.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. We could go back to item
1, 2.
number 3.
Item number 3 is a communication from the controller's office relative to a follow-up of the Los Angeles Convention and Visitor Bureau audit.
Okay. Welcome.
Good afternoon. Cynthia Varela with the Controller's Office. This was a follow-up audit of the Los Angeles Convention and Visitors Bureau, better known as LA Inc. The report was issued in April of 2008. We followed up on a 2002 audit that had been done on LA Inc.'s performance and compliance with the city's contract. And as you know, the purpose of the follow-up audit is to look at the implementation status of the recommendations that had been previously made. In the 2002 audit, there were 13 audit recommendations. With our follow-up audit, we found that LA Inc. was in general compliance with its contract terms and conditions and had addressed most of the prior audit recommendations. 7 of the original recommendations were fully implemented. Some of the notable things that they had accomplished, we noted that they'd enhanced their focus on leisure travel through new marketing programs. They added 2 city representatives as ex officio board members, made significant improvements to their website, and increased communications with key stakeholders and members. But we did note in some cases the city must take additional steps to fully meet the intent of the recommendations, the remaining recommendations. At the time of our follow-up, we noted the following key issues still needed to be addressed. Most of these related to the current contract terms. While the current contract was an improvement over the previous one, it was still lacking in some respects. Specifically, we noted it didn't define the city's expected economic impact resulting from LA Inc.'s efforts, and it does not define allowable expenses for city activities or how city funds should be allocated among various activities. TOT is, the city's annual allocation to LA Inc. is directly tied to the amount of TOT collected. And what we found is that the city should have a means to assure that that funding that's being provided to LA Inc. results in expected outcomes, increased tourism and business travel, and a positive impact on the economy through increased tax revenue. Our recommendation was that as a contract administrator, the CAO should consider other ways to measure LA Inc.'s efforts and include them as performance targets in the contract. We also noted the current contract does not include an approved budget for LA Inc., nor does it define allowable cost or specify how indirect costs should be allocated among its activities. So in the absence of clearly defined contract terms, all charges could be considered eligible and allowable. We noted that total expenses charged to TOT were proportionate to the amount of revenue that was received, but the city should better define in its contract how the TOT funds should be used. This can be accomplished by including a detailed line item budget in LA Inc.'s contract and specifically noting any restrictions to expenditure of city funds. I do want to point out in the CAO's response to the audit, they indicated that they intend to address those contract issues with the new 3-year contract that will be effective July 1st, 2009. The second key issue that was still outstanding, LA Inc. and also Los Angeles Convention Center should strengthen their procedures to justify, document, and monitor the convention center booking confirmation process. What we found is that LA Inc. had improved their booking processes by standardizing a letter of agreement, and that would be for their hotel bookings, their inside meetings. But convention bookings are considered definite upon the receipt of a signed LOA, but not a license agreement. And the license agreements are really the ones that hold them to financial consideration if the event planner decides to cancel. According to LA Inc., what we found is that event planners may be reluctant to sign a license agreement too far in advance of event because there is financial consideration associated with it if they cancel. We noted that 13 of the 15 bookings taking place within 24 months still did not have license agreements. And the cancellation rate for conventions booked by LA Inc. had not significantly changed since the prior audit. We recommended that LA Inc. continue to work with event planners and the convention center to ensure timely contract execution of events. The convention center is really the one that's responsible for issuing the license agreements. But LA Inc., as the primary contact person with event planners, can do additional work to see those things through. And the last key issue that was outstanding is dealt with LA Inc.'s incentive payments to their staff. They had revised their practices regarding incentive payments, but again, the city contract doesn't define or limit compensation type or amounts to be paid by TOT. They had instituted a more rigorous process for documenting and approving incentive payments to staff. The compensation practices were revised, and convention sales personnel are incentivized for leads, and they're paid bonuses based on bookings that are confirmed through letters of agreement rather than the executed license. We noted that some cities place limits on incentives or total amounts paid to staff using public funds, and the current city contract does not, and that's another item that CAO is going to be looking at when they go forward with renewing the new contract.
Is there someone here from the CAO's office on this item? Any general response to what the controller has raised? And I understand you have a report coming out in January, and at that time, this committee would like to review that along with the controller's office, and that's acceptable to the controller's office. But any general comments at this time from the CAO's office?
Diana Mangiolo, Office of the CAO. We've been in communication with the Controller's Office, and basically we've identified a timeline and plan as in which the CLA's office and our office will be working with LA Inc. to identify measures and hopefully addressing some of the issues that were raised in the controller's audit. So we do plan on incorporating that and making it as part of the proposed agreement process, and it will come before council and mayor for review.
Okay. Any questions or comments from? We'll note and file this report, and if we could, we'll schedule this item again in committee 90 days after the CEO releases its report.
So continue for 90 days.
Yes, we'll continue for 90 days. Okay. Thank you. Thank you very much. Item number 1.
Item number 1 is a motion by Council Members Rizar and Rosendahl relative to the report of the City Administrative Officer and the Chief Legislative Analyst to the Audits and Governmental Efficiency and Budget and Finance Committee for a pilot zero-based budget exercise for 3 departments as they prepare their proposed budget for fiscal year 2009-2010. This item was also referred to the Budget and Finance Committee.
Thank you and welcome very much. And as we all know, last year was a very difficult time for the city in terms of its financial situation, and we expect it to be as bad, if not worse, this coming fiscal year. And as the process went along, some of us were discussing the idea of implementing zero-based budgeting within several departments, and we suggested through the motion that there be 3 because it's a lot of intensive work, and if we were to do it for the whole budget, we figured that it would be a lot of work. We probably would be doing ourselves a disservice by calling something zero-based budget, but in fact we probably would just gloss over the real positive outcomes that may have come from doing real zero-based budgeting. So 3, we suggested 3 through the motion. I understand that the mayor has proposed through the letter he submitted last week a similar process which he refers to as space budgeting. It's as I've read what it is, it sounds very similar, but I think they are 2 things. But the important thing is that we get to the core of what our city is providing, to review those and not just get incremental proposals each and every year from the departments that we really don't see what else is in that department's budget. So with that in mind, the CAO is here to give us an outline of the process and where we are with this and how we suggest we may want to move forward with this motion.
Yes. My name is David Luther from the CAO's office. The mayor's office, the mayor's budget team and the CAO's budget team probably have some relevant comments on this subject, but currently they're having meetings. One of the changes that they made to the budget process this year is they're having pre-budget submittal meetings with department heads. So those kicked off today, and that's where they are. But with your permission, I'll just give you a brief status report on some of the actions that have been taken with regard to zero-based budgeting. Since the motion was introduced, there was a meeting between the CLA, the mayor's office, and the CAO to discuss that motion. And the purpose of that meeting was really to ascertain if the mayor's office would incorporate some of that in their proposed budget. And the result of that meeting was yes, the mayor's budget team was receptive to looking at the zero-based budget idea and incorporating some elements into their proposed budget. There was a second meeting I've heard, I didn't go to that meeting, but a few weeks ago between the CLA and the mayor on the same subject. The mayor's office and the CAO met with 4 city departments that have some elements of zero-based budgeting currently, and they were the Information Technology Agency, the Bureau of Sanitation, the Bureau of Contract Administration, and the Bureau of Engineering. We've looked at other jurisdictions that currently have a zero-based budgeting system in place. We've developed criteria for implementing our own zero-based budgeting exercise. Essentially the classic model, which is, as you know, very, very, very intensive. And modifications to that classic model, which would be perhaps, if you will, an expedited zero-based budgeting exercise. We're currently working on a ZBB exercise for contractual services in the city. All of the what we call the 304 account, all the contractual services, and the stormwater program. And they were selected for 2 specific reasons. The stormwater program currently doesn't generate enough revenues to basically pay for itself, so the general fund subsidizes stormwater. That's an excellent candidate for zero-based budgeting. Basically, if you have an agency or a function in fiscal distress, there's some advantages to looking at the base and how the monies are spent. Contractual services was chosen because another good candidate for ZBB would be some kind of function or service where you think there might be some flexibility in how you spend that money. And we do believe that given the size of that account in the city, I'm off the top of my head, at least over $100 million, maybe $200 million, that with a ZBB exercise, we could probably identify some funds either to reduce or to shift to other priorities. You had mentioned the mayor's policy letter, and that did contain some components of zero-based budgeting. It wasn't a full-blown zero-based budgeting exercise, but it did have these elements that are common to zero-based budgeting. A look at which services are mandated, which services are not, what services are core, what are the results of the service, the outcomes, is the service well delivered, what is the value of the service to constituents, and how much does it cost. That memo was released on October 2nd. On October 3rd, the CAO released their own budget memo, which is a companion piece to the mayor's memo. And in that letter, we provided some guidance to departments on how to develop quality performance metrics. We committed to a city-wide review of the program structure of the budget, which will lead to a budget that better reflects departmental services and resource allocation. And that's basically in direct response to the council's desire to, when they look at these budget books, to not just look at the blue book, which is the summary of incremental changes, but to somewhere find in these budget books more information on the base budget. So it's a major undertaking. We're essentially going to review the entire program structure as it currently exists for all departments. For each program that is identified as we go through this process, we are expecting that each program have a goal, each program have a performance metric. I think another major change is that we're going to incorporate this into our city's budgeting system, BRASS, for the first time, performance measures, and that will allow us to then report periodically throughout the fiscal year to mayor and council on the accomplishment of those program metrics. I think that's it. That's pretty much the status of where we are today.
Although we're not doing the full-blown zero-based budgeting, I think that does make an attempt. But would this be across the board that we will apply these questions, or is it just to these 4 departments that you mentioned?
It's across the board and citywide. There are still discussions taking place, though, with the mayor's office and the CLA if we're going to go further than this, which is to identify some specific target departments that we could do a full-blown exercise with. There's a lot of considerations that have to be identified, I think, before we do that. There's some departments that I think you could easily do a ZBB exercise, and some departments that you just simply couldn't at this point. And those issues revolve really around how advanced they are in strategic planning as a department. That's the first step. And how well they are in collecting data that we need for the study, which is basically cost data and performance data and outcome data. If departments don't have those basic elements, it's starting beyond scratch. It's going to be very difficult to do.
Mm-hmm. Well, my own personal opinion is that it is a start. I think asking these questions of all the departments and all the budget is really a different path than we've taken in the past, at least my 2.5 years that I've been on council. But at the same time, we could have learned a whole lot more if we actually commit ourselves to 2 or 3 departments and do a full-blown zero-based budgeting. We would have learned a lot, too, and to apply it to additional departments each year. That is my own personal opinion about what direction we should take, but I understand the mayor's office does have its within its purview to set the path he'll take because they set the process and then forward the budget to us in council. And But I think this is a start, and this is, at least we're going to be asking some very core questions that we have to in this, probably one of the worst budget years the city has seen, which is the coming fiscal year. Questions, comments?
Yeah.
I like the ZBB. I saw him kind of, his head go up when you said ZBB. I hadn't heard that. ZBB. When you're talking about the departments, you were talking about contracting, right? What were the four?
Well, the four departments that we met with were
Okay. Contract services.
ITA, because obviously she had done some
IT sanitation.
of that last year. Bureau of Sanitation, who's
Right.
extremely advanced in strategic planning, probably within the city proper, not excluding proprietary, is probably the most advanced department as far as strategic planning. Bureau of Contract Administration and Engineering, and the elements that they have as ZBB is basically because they prepare their budgets based on projects that they're going to either, that they're currently working on or are going to, they're basically coming down the pipeline for the next year. So they develop work plans for each project, and they kind of ran us through their systems. I wouldn't say it is a classic zero-based budgeting that they do. But essentially the components of how they build the budget, they look at everything. They look at the entire base every year.
And I know for some of the departments, and it'd be interesting to look, if you're going to look at one of those departments, and nothing against engineering and whatever, but we have heard that when you look at the admin costs associated with some of those projects, which ultimately is sometimes general fund money or MICLA fund or whatever, how that is allocated in comparison. I think people would.
We had asked that question in those meetings, and you're right. In Bureau of Contract Administration and Engineering, they don't zero-base their support functions or admin functions. So.
And I think that would, to look at that as well, and how it compares to other administrative costs that we have for other projects in the city that are operated by other departments. I think that would be important to do.
Yeah.
But I know, and I wholeheartedly support the motion that Mr. Weeser did with Mr. Rosendahl, because we have been talking about ITA. I mean, it took ITA a long time to do that, but I think the concern I have, and express this to the mayor's office too, which is, there's never a good time to do zero-based budgeting. It is a lengthy process, but the benefits you reap are much greater than the problems you have in doing that. And so I think we really want to go down to the basics, because I know even in talking to Bill Robertson, and when you talk about a 6% cut in his department for street service, that's $15 million. $15 million is a lot of money for streets and sidewalks and other things. And so how do we, you can't necessarily go to each department and say 6%, makes sense for each and every department and where we can do that. And I believe with the leadership of our budget chair as well, the idea is not also to wait until April when the mayor presents his budget to us, because then it's too late. It really is, we don't have, even I know in the budget committee, we do make changes, and there is some, but when you're in a budget like this, it's a very difficult time to, in 6 weeks, make changes. So I know the CAO is going to work with us in the mayor's office and with these FSRs, but to really start focusing on that now and not wait until April to make some of these decisions, because by then it's harder to cut positions when you've hired people.
Agree.
See, Lynn Ozawa from the CLA is here. Any comments, anything you'd like to add? Are you conveniently hiding back there? Or?
I heard David was going to have.
I agree that because the city's budget is so large and complex, that the mayor's approach is not exactly zero-based budgeting as you know it, but it is a step in the right direction. You do need to start with what's in the base. You need to know what's in there. And his plan, I think, is a big step in that direction. Yes, it would have been great if we could have had 3 departments already selected at this point that would go through a much more intensive process. However, I think in the broader picture, to get all departments to show what's in their base the first year is a bigger accomplishment than we might have gotten if we only did zero base for 3 budgets. So in that respect, I think this approach is a good approach. However, once we get through this year, going through the base of all the departments, I'm in total agreement with your approach that then we need to go farther each year by selecting 3 departments or whatever the number may be, so that we can truly do a zero-based analysis.
Which we all know it's a lot, it's very intensive and takes a lot of
Yes,
time. And so
as
we
you
gotta
taught me.
start that and everything. So we'll note and file this item, and I want to thank you both for being here and for your work on this, and really appreciate it. And
That's it, sir.
that's it.
Yep.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you.
Ooh, I have some found time.